Okay, so Dawn of Man. It's a kind of Banished-like game, but there's some stuff this game has that Banished doesn't, and vice versa. And I just noticed my game is still in German, even though I switched the language over on Steam. There we go. So we have different scenarios in this game, like Continental Dawn, which is just normal game mode. The Northlands, which is, the name basically says it's the same game but further up north. Challenging difficulties. Summers are shorter, winters are longer. There's also different animals. And Ancient Warriors is it's more combat oriented, albeit then again in this game you will always have this sort of settlement you're growing, and the combat is always restricted to defense. Then you've also got some challenges here that you can do, and creative mode, which I never tried out. And there's a lot of like community maps. The modding in this game is not as extensive as with Banished, as for now. That could still change at some point in the future, but for now it's mostly mapping and like tweaks around stuff like resources and like migration, etc. This game has a tutorial, but I won't play it probably. It's just some of the basics, but not everything. It doesn't tell you everything you need to know. Once you go into a scenario, you have this location selection. You always start in the Paleolithic and you can run up to the Iron Age. Let's see, we have twisty rivers, mountain lakes, river fork, forest river, emerging streams, and lake valley. Something that you will notice with all of these scenarios is that none of these have realistic landscapes. It's sort of a mixture in between like river systems or lakes, and always hilly. I don't know if there's any differences in difficulties from each map to the next. I guess the only thing that probably makes a difference is the availability of water, which is a bit less with the lakes and a bit more with the river systems. Beyond that, you can do any of these. Also, you can build bridges in this game, but only over a certain span, so they don't make sense for the lake maps, but those bridges do make sense for river maps. You can type in some name of the settlement. There's also like a pool of auto-generated names. You have two game modes. Normal, which is a standard game, unlimited saves, other tribes. What's meant with other tribes is essentially raiders. Yeah, normal amounts of raiders and reduced animal. Then you can also like select between two modes, settled or nomads, which settled has a couple of tents and a fireplace, which you start out with. So yeah, these are just the other two, like hardcore, you have only one save. Other tribes, which means raiders, you can end up with like raiders coming over with like copper weapons, bronze weapons, steel weapons, while you're just lagging behind in technology. That can easily happen. And Nomad, if you take that starting condition, you have no structures. It says extra resources here, but in my opinion you end up with less resources than with a settled starting condition. Because what Nomads is, it's that you start with the same amount of people basically, but they have inventory slots and those are filled with some amount of resources. But the amount of inventory space that is filled is less than the amount of resources that is needed to build those couple tents and the fireplace, in my opinion. So let's pick one of these scenarios. Merging streams, I would say, is the most vanilla experience you can possibly have. I don't know, let's pick forest rivers maybe? So this is what you start out with. You have 2 tents, a fireplace, a crafter and some wood pile here. You have 4 game speeds, 1 times, twice, 4 times and 8 times as fast. Space is the pause button. Yeah. And with tab you can go into this view, which tells you where there are resources and animals. Generally speaking, food is highlighted as green, flint is highlighted gray, animals which are more difficult to hunt are yellow, and aggressive animals are in red. This orangey color is like animals which will defend themselves maybe. Sticks you can see. Normal rocks are also a resource, but they are not highlighted. Same as any tree. All of these trees, for example oak still has tannin, which you require for leather. It also, if you cut it down, it will provide wood and sticks. So all of this still gives you resources, but this view will not tell you this. Then this is copper ore. This is a place where you can mine flint. You also have tin for bronze, which you have to have both copper and tin for bronze. And then you have iron, which is the last thing you can unlock. And you probably also already noticed these giant things here. Those are megaliths, which you can mine and then transport. For megalithic structures, which you have standing stones, you have like cut and painted statues, like a basic variety of 3, and stone circles and dolmen structures, which are those are used to bury people. And the last building you will unlock is a funerary. This thing down here is basically what you work with, your UI. And on the top left you have some stats, and on the top right also. Oh yeah, what I was going to say is you also have like a one final large structure you can build with megaliths, which is a kind of burial mound. So on the top left here you have all of our resources, which is like fish, meat, sticks, some flint, raw skin, and like individual tools. You can also see that there are different varieties of tools depending on what they are made from. Like wooden sticks are the easiest to build but also the weakest, and steel spears are the most effective, but also you will need iron. Then you can add whatever else you want to this, and I like to pick food, which is important, and defense. So the food thing is basically a graph which runs over the time span of I think a year, and defense is basically no alert, which means that all of your people will pick up tools and weapons to defend themselves. If you have defensive structures like a tower, they will man it if they have bows, or spears to throw if you have a platform. And you can also manually open or lock all gates. On the top right you can see your population as well as your capacity. This is important. If your capacity is higher than your population, then you can take in migrants and births. If it's below, you do not expand your population. Then you have knowledge points, which we'll get to later, and you have your workload. This is also important. This is how many tasks each individual has to manage. And then you have the temperatures and the how do you say, the season. Then you can also add here the same couple things. I like to put animal population and like attachments or transports, basically. In the German localization of this game, it's transport. You can see the amount of animals you can domesticate in this game is limited to goats, sheep, pigs, cattle, donkeys, and horses. And on the right it says how much shelter you have. You will only need shelter if you want your animals to survive the winter, which is preferable. And transport, you have your sledge, which is easy to build. I like relying on those, because from the other ones, the sledges are the only ones that don't require animals. Then you have carts, which can usually hold twice as many items as sledges, but the AI does not tend to use it like that, so I usually do not use carts. But they would be faster, they take more to build, and they require an animal. They can also return to your settlement individually, or like on their own. Then rolling megaliths is basically once you mine a large rock and prepare it for transport, it will show here. And then you have plows. Those are really good once you get to farming, but late game. It's sadly only late game. In the tech tree you can see all of the ages that we go through and all of the technologies. This is vanilla, so some technologies are dependent on some others which do not make sense. So, for example, what do we say? You have something like let's pick, yeah, let's say you have pottery here. Once we unlock all of this, all of the takes in the Paleolithic, you have to necessarily unlock pottery in order to be able to craft bows. Which does not make sense, but it's a prerequisite. Also, this interface does not tell you this offhand, but ages are tied to animal extinctions. So once you go from one to the next, like mammoths die out, woolly rhinos die out, wild horses turn into feral horses, and wild horses die out, etc. I don't know, let's get to the game. So one of the big things that you have to do in this game is place work areas. So I have here like collect sticks, and then I place it down in this area, and somebody will come over to collect all of these. And you can assign up to 5 tasks, which means 5 people will come over to collect sticks until this maximum is reached. Sticks are very important for like early game, like tents, etc. Late game you will not require them much for some stuff anymore, but you have other expenditures like tools require a lot of sticks if you don't work with bone tools, etc. Stuff like bone sticks as crafting material is essentially unlimited. Later on, once you get to like mining, copper, etc., like those are limited resources. At some point those run out, and then you have to travel further and further until you can't travel any further anymore because it's too far away from your village. If you want to play a really long game, then you have to start trading for ores. So yeah. You can also assign a hunting area, but the AI is not perfect for hunting, so I like to do hunting manually. At some point you also want to like stop hunting because it's easier to use domesticated animals. Also, you can do city planning essentially any way you want to do. I usually like to go more of an effective route, which means like structuring everything in like a grid, etc. But that's just my style. One difference between this game and Banished is that you cannot assign jobs. So all of your villagers will do all of the tasks depending on like what they can do, what the tools are, etc. What's important to do. Early game, the right skins are important because that's your building and also clothing material. Later on you technically won't need uh, these skins anymore. But only technically. Also, one thing to remember is that since it's a banished-like game, it's always easy to enter downward spirals, etc. So it's okay to restart. Different tasks like hunting different animals and getting this or that amount of resources or building this or that will give you knowledge points. I've noticed that by far the easiest way to get knowledge is to hunt animals, because every animal type gives you at least one knowledge point, and then different amounts of animals you've hunted will give you knowledge points, and also the resources you collect from those animals give you knowledge. Also, yeah, the music in this game is sort of like it's meant to be time appropriate, but it's also, in my opinion, location independent. Like you have tunes and sounds and uh, registers which could potentially come from anywhere in the world. It's not specifically Europe or specifically Mesopotamia or whatever. You have audio cues from everywhere. The workload is high if it's like 100 or whatever. So as it says, sometimes it will take longer to complete tasks, like let's say building something or whatever. It is really difficult to stay below high or very high workload, to my experience. So like once you get agriculture running, you want to prioritize farming. because like the more hands you have, the more food do you need for people, so they don't starve. So one person, one farmer has to produce more food than just for himself, because you also need resources, you need tools, you need building material. Megaloceros, I think that one is localized in the German version as a giant stag or whatever. Not sure anymore. Yeah, traders will arrive every once in a while. They carry different age-appropriate materials, but also you can buy technology from them. The commission is meant to say how much they have in stock, but to my experience the commission is always either average or low. I've never seen a commission in 150 hours in this game which was high and had like a lot of stuff in it. Also you'll notice that stuff that a trader sells is valued higher than stuff that we have. So like if we want to sell a log, it will have the value of 1. But if we want to buy a log, then 1 free, so it's like 1.5 the value. 4, 6. It's 1.5. But if we want to sell a log of wood, then it's only 1. I always like to use fireplaces as nodes for the grid that I want to lay the village out in. Also, one thing that is important to know is that if you have one piece of food or whatever, and they put that food down in a storage, then that one food is only available in that specific storage, not in another one somewhere else. So you want to have food storage like at various points around your village. One good strategy is to have always at least one food storage at like a gate once you get to constructing walls, etc. fast animals are a bit of a pain in the ass because they will travel far. That's also a good strategy. You can drive animals towards your village by attacking them from one specific spot, and then it's just easier to kill them off with the rest of your villagers. And that's a cave lion. That one will attack villagers usually more often once his nutrition is getting low, but we can also hunt them. And in a sense, cave lions and stuff like that is easier to hunt because they don't run away. So your villagers can just swarm them. Also, you can probably tell that there's a brighter spot in the river here. That's because there's a fording pod here. Uh, a little stretch of water that you can ford through. If it's not like that, they have to swim, which is swimming takes longer, and like when villagers swim, they can't really hunt much or do other stuff, etc. Or like I haven't tested this, but they cannot pull megaliths through just rivers. They would need to use the ford, for example, or also pulling sleds across water, etc. That's why later on you can build bridges here across the river. Interestingly enough, you cannot build bridges over fords. I've tried that one. And also, if there's a fording place which is closer than a bridge, the villagers will prioritize to ford and like walk through the water rather than walking dry. If you look at the tools, there's also like, you can tell right off the bat there's like a rating how efficient those are. Crafters are like for makeshift tools, like bone tools, flint, and later on you have smithies. Also, yes, dog domestication and what was it, dog training are two different things. You can have dogs which will like defend your village or your tents, but only once you have dog training they will also help you hunt. You can manually tame wild wolves, but usually, to my testing, dogs will also just randomly spawn in your village. Also, this screen is important. You have to set limits for different stuff. If it's something like 100 units, then we'll just collect 100 pieces of meat. But you can go higher, and then it's percentage of the population. So if you have 20 people and you set it to like 50% meat, then your people, if you have 20, it will collect 10 pieces of meat. You can go as high as 150 or then infinite. Food, to my experience, you always want to have at infinite. Water, you actually don't need at infinite. Your villagers will drink from wells or from the river if they need to. Potted water is drinkable, but it's mainly also used to produce like beer. Also, something which is interesting to know is that you can produce grain, and grain will it will not spoil for a long time, but if you bake it into bread it will. Also, a good tip from me is that you want to have your clothes and your tools at 125% of your villagers. So there's always a little bit more than you have people, because otherwise every one person in your village will have to manufacture his or her or their own equipment. As to why it says A instead of percentage mark, I don't know, I think that's a bug. Also, yeah, as always, we have an open call. Domesticated animals. You don't want your domesticated animals to breed infinitely, even though it is the default setting. Every animal will require straw to survive the winter, and straw is also a building material. So you don't want to lose all of your straw, have your animals die, and then your buildings collapse. Spiritual buildings basically help. I would like to say passively, but it's still active. They help with your people's morale. You also have morale. If morale is low, like here, then the person won't die, but they will be less effective in doing stuff. They will walk slower, etc. Oh, that one's a big one. We could hunt this one. Let's try it. So yeah, we were able to hunt the rhino without losing a single person. Somebody is badly injured, but they will recover unless they get an infection. Also, like, yeah, stuff like woolly rhinos give bad amount of meat and skins, but they will die out. So this guy has contracted an infection. Their health will deteriorate. They can lose the infection at some point if they survive until then. Somebody has just died from an infection, which meant that they lost their health at a faster pace than like losing the infection. Also, yeah, there's also burials in this game. The tooltips tend to explain it well. And we have an animal attack. Early game you have a lot of animal attacks, and later on there's raiders. Animal attacks are in a sense good because you don't have to hunt these animals down anymore. They're just in your village ready to be slaughtered. Now that's a lot of meat and a lot of skins and bones. Raiders will later on, if you kill them, they will supply you with tools and weapons and armor. In a sense, it's a neat way to get high quality equipment if you're on a hardcore run, but again, you have to survive the raid. In this game, your village will predominantly grow from migration rather than births, which people have tweaked in community maps. If you want to have your village grow more by births than migration, if any migration or stuff like that, like people have made maps where it's like that. But in vanilla it's more migration. Also, yes, buildings have condition and they deteriorate over time and will need repairs. storms drain morale, and there's a slight chance that like an animal or a person will get struck by lightning. As soon as nutrition is low, hunting animals will attack you. Food dryers are good because cured meat and dry fish is it lasts for longer, yeah, as the tooltip says. With priority, you can just tell your people if you want them to do something or other sooner than later. Interestingly enough, priority does not seem to work well for fields. Albeit you can still set them as priority, your villagers won't prioritize them somehow.
Hib.
Mammoths give the most amount of meat and skin and bones per hunt, but there's only ever few and you will need to be able to reach them somehow if you want to hunt them. This is sort of like best case scenario early game. If you have an animal running in the midst of your spider web, so to say, if in the midst of your village. That's way more food dryers than we'll need, but it's a good way to like store sticks, and you can later on still use this space, which is within our or my grid here for other stuff. Early game dried skins give like they have a value of 5. Later on, when they aren't really useful anymore, they just have a value of 1. I think early game it's a good strategy to get some logs, get some stone, etc. and trade those for food. Later on it's not wise to trade for food much, but for ores. If you set everything up correctly, you can even, if you feel like it, but it's not recommended, you could theoretically export food. In my opinion though, the best trade good is wool and then textiles from wool. Wool is easy to get, it's a value of 7, and it's an unlimited resource. When I play this game in like for myself without streaming, I just like to turn off all of the in-game audio and listen to other stuff on the side. Because it is true that there's some repetition over time. There's some people who like to play with pulses, but in my opinion I've never found use for them. I don't even need to hunt animals if they readily enter the town, the village.
They wanna assimilate. Sorry.
Yeah, uwu, but like, it is really funny how, in a sense, your village does function a bit like a spider web early on in this game.
I will think they would probably program the animals to kind of try to avoid built-up areas.
And you would think it was that way, but in vanilla at least, animals are just as likely to attack your village or villagers inside your village as they are outside. There's community maps which fix that behavior, but in vanilla, animals don't actually try to stay outside of your village. If they have little nutrition, they just try eating your villagers. It's not even an exploit, it's just a funny thing that happens in this game. It just works. Also, a funny little tip is that these drying racks don't... well, they do take up space, but stuff can move through these freely. Like even a rolling megalith or whatever can just travel through these. So if you want to, you could theoretically set them up in these little roads or whatever in between these cells that I'm planning out here. You could just plant these food dryers in those roads and it works just as well. The only thing that they will collide with are exits. If I have this construction thing here, you can see a green arrow, that's an exit. If I try placing one here, it takes up the space of those exits, and that can happen. But I can place one here in the middle of these because there's no exit blocked by it. It's a bit like if you want to park a car. Well, a car you can walk through. Though technically you can climb through every car. Well, you know what I mean. Leather is... you can use it for light clothes, but I don't think that's effective all that much in this game. It's better if you keep leather to spare because rolling megaliths require leather and also guard towers to defend your village. And sleds, which make it much easier to transport goods. So you better invest that leather into sleds and defense rather than clothing. Especially since your villagers can't die from heat, but they can die from cold. And cold is winter clothing is either skins or later on wool. Trees also grow infinitely. The only thing you can do to stop tree growth is to build over them. That also makes, at least for a while, it makes it easy to export logs, but you will also require logs later on. Oh yeah, there's a bit of a conflict between trying to collect tannin, which is required for leather, and cutting down trees. So theoretically, you want to keep like 2 woods, one wood for logs for timber, and another wood for like tannin. I can say right off the bat you will need a whole lot of logs for palisades. So we could acquire pottery, but I'll wait a little bit more. I think raids start in the Neolithic, but I'm not sure anymore. Also, little etymology excursus. Paleo and Lithic. The early Stone Age. Paleo means old, Lithic is lithos, stone. Meso is middle, and Neo. Neo means new, but here it means the late Stone Age.
Would lapis? Oh no, wait.
Repeat.
Zero. Would that be better?
I don't get what you're trying to say.
Zero, because zero means late.
I mean, you could debate it, albeit it's just a naming convention.
Hmm. Why didn't I get an invite to the convention? That was bad, sorry.
Imagine what if linguist conventions were as bad as furry conventions.
Jeez. Imagine.
Probably don't need to imagine it.
Yeah.
I think the only actually reliable way to produce tools in this game, which can run infinitely, is bone tools. Everything else can run out, like flint runs out, ores run out. And for some reason you cannot use stone. Don't ask me why.
Why? No.
You can produce harpoons and spears from just wood. But even just the biface for some reason requires flint specifically. There is a mammoth semi nearby which we could hunt. That would probably be good. I suppose, I'm not sure. Could be everyone just dies.
One never knows if one tries, but one never knows if one dies.
Plus point is we have dogs at this point. They will help. Sometimes you can also like plan hunting a mammoth once it's already been assaulted by another animal, and that's easier.
Effectiveness.
There's a storm outside IRL.
Here it's melting.
I think the way I want to plan my village is occupy this area here, and especially this entire area across the river will be farming, I suppose. generally speaking, you want to have a little bit of a community build up once you go into agriculture, because it requires people to farm. At least during the sow season and the harvesting season. Later on you will also require space for like stables and animals, which usually you want your animals close to your farms and to a source of water. Also, what I sometimes like to do is you have like different grains, but you can also like domesticate flax, for instance. And I like putting flaxes nearby water. It's just an aesthetic thing.
What is flag? What?
Uh, Flax from which you produce linen.
Huh? Spell it out, because I'm having a hard time understanding that word.
Flax. The stream is a little bit behind, but you will see it on the tooltip.
Flax. Okay.
Flax.
Yeah. Flax. Hold on. Let me. Never heard that word. Hold on.
Flax.
Flich.
Interestingly enough, there's no rice in this game.
So it is lean.
Linen.
Yeah, in Sweden we apparently just call it lean or LIN.
Uh, Probably the same etymology as linen, which is produced from flax.
Yeah. Linum occitatissimum. So I guess the etymology is that it probably is based on the Latin. Linum. And apparently one of the words for it is salmon. Because, of course.
Oh, there's even more mammoths. Also, one thing which is super cool is when you attack a young animal, the older animals will start attacking you, which makes it really easy to hunt them. Once you have sledges, it's a lot easier to transport goods like meat, etc. Because a person can hold 2 items and a sled can have 6, I think. Plus then the 2 item slots for the person. It is funny that there's only one person watching right now when like 3 or 4 people or whatever, or was it? No, it was 3 people maybe voted for watching this game. I'm not sure anymore.
I don't know how it counts because I'm looking at the users, and it's there is 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I mean,
With
you can see the emojis for people who voted on that server, but there's also people who voted on other servers.
uh, changing it to the phone.
Some people were really amazed that I once wrote in a forum somewhere that I'm usually playing at like above 200% workload, but in my opinion, it just works. Like, bro, it's hard to stay below 200, like, to not have a very high workload in this game, in my opinion.
I'm having to wipe myself like every 5 minutes with like a wet towel on my head because it's so warm here.
Ovo.
Ah,
I love how the viewer count was 3 for a moment until we went there and then it dropped back.
It probably is that it probably still counted my old client on the computer because I switched it to my phone.
Food graph going through the roof like COVID cases IRL.
Eeh.
To the moon!
Moo.
So the tasks UI just tells you what are pending tasks and what are people working on right now, and the difference between those produces the workload. So there's a lot of like curing meat, which increases the workload because we just killed so many mammoths. If villagers have to carry heavy material like logs and stones, both their fatigue and their morale drops faster.
Actually, reminds me of like what was the game called? RimWorld, the one with the questionable developer, but the way it had a morale system as well for colonists and stuff. Well, one apparently this is a meme still, and if you make a villager or a colonist eat without a table, they will forever be scarred because apparently eating without a table is one of the largest sins to man.
I just noticed I passed up on an opportunity.
What?
I could have named my settlement Bleatington. Bleatopolis.
Bleed to bloop.
I really want to get to agriculture because if you play agriculture right, then you have just food security. But only if you play it right, otherwise it can also be a death spiral. You have to produce each sled individually. If you want to place down more, it's shift plus left mouse button, and later on in the game you can automize production with a workshop building. To my experience, having enough sleds can make or break a village. Because if you have no sleds, or if you run out of those, then suddenly one task will require 6 people instead of 1. Like someone can fell a tree with a sled and then just return with all of the tree on top of the sled. But otherwise you will require villagers to take every stick and every log back to the village. Because the AI is bad at hunting, that's why you never send the AI. It just sent like 2 people and both of them died because it's 4 bears and like 1 is big.
The hyper is coming. Wow.
They got dominated by a big fat bear.
That happens.
There's probably more efficient ways to play this game, but you can play it however you want, really.
Kropotkin is an actual city? Huh? Which city is it today in Germany that used to be called Karl-Marx-Stadt?
I think that's Dresden or something.
Chemnitz. Hmm.
Was it Chemnitz? Oh yeah.
Yeah, just looking at the map, and apparently there is a city of Kropotkin in Russia, close to the Georgian border.
Chemnitz was also at the center point of fascist rallies for a long time.
Punch in the face to call it Karl-Marx-Stadt.
Uh, it was named Karl-Marx-Stadt during the Soviet times, and the fascist rallies happened after 1991.
Oof.
Later on, it makes sense to recycle all of the tanning racks and drying racks and mortars, because this is flat building area, and those you can also build on like uneven terrain really easily. Actually, we could migrate some of these already, maybe. Either along the river or somewhere else. I don't know. Later on you can also build watermills along rivers and, interestingly enough, also along lakes, even though there wouldn't be any water power to use there, but whatever. There's an achievement you can get if you tech rush the game, and like one of the things you can do or abuse to get there is like continuously building and recycling the same buildings, because you still get knowledge points for having built them.
I hear moan.
Stretching on my back.
And I give massage.
I think this game will be a longer series again of streams because it does take a while until you're at producing steel. Easy peasy 3 mammoths. Okay, we could go into the Neolithic now, but I'm holding off because I'm relatively certain that if the Palisade tag is in that era, then the raids also start then. Though actually, it is pretty easy still to defend yourself without walls.
I'm gonna have to go now.
Okay,
Exercise and a shower. Well, have a nice rest of your stream, right? Nice rest of your night.
good night.
Good night. How do I do it on this?
Now we're going to need a whole lot of space. This is also funny, the raiders are few. We want to be having free space here for agriculture by spring. Also, this is the latest point by which you want to have infinite production of grain. flour to something like 10 or 20, and bread at least around 30–25%. Um, Bringing out seeds, sowing does not require any tools. Later on you can use plows to speed it up, but it's not required. Later on we'll move all of this and replace it with flax. The next thing after agriculture is here, which would be really good, is thatched roofing or thatching. So that's already a lot of food. Even if we were unable to sow everything, this will help. Also, you can build as many bridges as you want to. They don't hinder fishing or anything. It looks like they might not be able to bring in the entire harvest, but don't worry about it, doesn't matter. Look at the food curve, we still have enough. Like as long as you survive for another year, everything's fine, you can fix things, and next year it runs better. Now that we have thatched roofing, we cannot upgrade our buildings right away, we need mud. Actually, there's a triple point here, so we could move these workstations a bit further up. In the grand scheme of things, that's more efficient. So this is what the village looks like around the early Neolithic, like around when you get agriculture. I do think it's a very cool transition, and everything's completely controlled by you. The only thing that you can't do is change the looks of the crafters for some reason. Now that we have underground mining, we can get more flint, which will make it a bit easier, maybe. Maybe. Later on there's a whole different tab for metallurgy, which will have all of the other mines, which makes this a bit weird that there's just one type of mine in the production interface, but then all of the other mines are in the metallurgy interface. We still have plenty of grain from last year. It would be really neat if these either could have been upgraded, or maybe if there's like an automatic graphics switch, or like maybe right from the beginning these could have had a more universal look rather than dried skin. Do we still have a gatherer out? Because that labor could be used elsewhere. once you have agriculture, then food security is a lot better. If you like watching right now, or you've skipped ahead a bit, I explained the game very early on. I think this is actually a good point at which to pause for now. You can see we have a good balance for food. We have plenty of people, plenty of research, we have trading goods. There's plenty of wood to go around later on also for the palisade. So yeah, we'll continue next stream.